Welcome back, everybody, to the Fretboard Journal podcast. I'm your host, Jason Verlinde. How are we all doing out there? I hope everybody is hanging in there. As always, you can send feedback. You can send me a note. You can send whatever you like to podcast@fretboardjournal.com. We had so many incredible letters about the Ella Feingold episode that we put out last week, so thank you. By all means, if you haven't listened to that one, go check it out as well. Our 55th issue of the Fretboard Journal's print edition is mailing right now to subscribers around the world. I know many of you have already devoured it. Thank you. If you want to join us, go to fretboardjournal.com and click on the subscribe button. And on the cover of that issue is today's podcast guest, D'Addario founder Jim D'Addario. Over the last 20 or so years, I have been privileged enough to interview all sorts of legendary figures in the world of guitar. Famous guitar makers who created giant companies. Individuals who painstakingly work on one instrument at a time, and all points in between. Jim D'Addario's story is unlike any I have ever heard. Jim has string making literally in his DNA. It's his family heritage. And he created a company by bootstrapping it, by being tenacious, by innovating when no one else was innovating. And he's created this giant company now. Everybody knows D'Addario. But he's still a tinkerer. And it's so rare to meet somebody who is at his level with so many employees, with such a large business, who still goes home and tries to invent things. Jim's story is also incredibly fascinating to me because here is somebody who was mentored as a child by the one and only Mario Maccaferri, the same Mario Maccaferri who decades earlier designed the Selmer guitar made famous by Django Reinhardt. It's such a fascinating story. Jim is such a cool guy. He is just a fountain of ideas and energy, and through it all, he has remained an incredible guitar player and guitar collector, and really just someone who celebrates the same stuff that we all do. I got to see Jim just a week or two ago at the NAMM show in Anaheim. It's always a little scary when you write a story about a subject and then see that subject the next time. Thankfully, Jim said he liked how my story turned out, so I'm grateful for that. And we will just keep the interesting guitar stories coming. I feel like there's a need for them in the world more than ever. And I can't thank you enough for tuning in. We have a whole bunch of podcasts. Hopefully you know that. The Truth About Vintage Amps podcast just put out a new episode. Jerry Douglas is on our new Steel podcast, if you haven't checked that out yet. Huge thanks to our sponsors. They are Mike and Mike's Guitar Bar here in Seattle, Washington. One of the coolest guitar stores around. One of the most interesting and eclectic inventories you'll ever find. Vintage guitars, acoustics and electric synths, you name it, it's all there. One of my favorite places to hang out. We are also brought to you by our friends at Peghead Nation, where you can get your first month free or $20 off an annual subscription by using the discount code Fretboard. So many Fretboard Journal subjects have taught for Peghead Nation. Our audiences, I think, overlap perfectly. I love their style. I love what they're all about. I think you will as well. We are also brought to you by our friends at Collings Guitars. If you have not followed what Collings brought out to the recent NAMM show, they unveiled the Ladybird. This is a guitar that everybody who attended the Fretboard Summit got to see for the last year or so. Everything they're doing is just so amazing, and I'm happy to announce they're going to be back at our 2025 Fretboard Summit, August 21st to 23rd in Chicago at the Old Town School of Folk Music. Please register as soon as you can at fretboardsummit.org. Passes are selling very quickly. Those are my big announcements, and now I'm going to share with you the second or third interview I've now done with Jim D'Addario, and they all have been inspiring, and I've learned so much from each and every one of them. I hope you enjoy it. This is sort of the Cliff's Notes version of the interview that is in the new issue of the magazine. Go check that out as well. Jim, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
My pleasure.
I was lucky enough a few months ago to get the guided tour from you through the facility over in Long Island. I'm walking around this vast facility of yours, and I've been a guitarist for my whole life, but my eyes are like saucers. I'm walking around with our photographer because I had no idea just how guitar strings were made. And I have to imagine, is this like, do you see this reaction all the time when people from the industry come through, or luthiers, or even players?
Yeah, I mean, I see it from just even when I bring friends that aren't musicians, sometimes they want to see what I do and what we do here, and pretty much get the same reaction. I mean, we know that the best sales job we could do is to get somebody to come and take a factory tour. We're very proud of our factories, and there's 7 buildings in this campus now. Over during the pandemic, we've added 3, and we continue to grow and move more product to be manufactured here in Farmingdale, New York. We have about 850 people here now. But we wouldn't be able to do it if we weren't investing continually year over year into automation and other ways to stay super efficient and vertical integration, so that we actually make a lot of the materials that we were previously required to source. So we make like 75% of all the wire we use now. And, we do our own packaging printing, and we do injection molding now. So we're always vertically integrating in the operation, which makes it necessary for us to have peripheral buildings and continually to learn a new business, which is, for me, a challenge, and also very, exciting and fun, to learn those things. So like just 2.5, 3 years ago during the pandemic, we committed to vertically integrating injection molding in, so that we could produce more of the guitar accessories and actually for every brand, accessories that require injection molded parts, like reed cases or picks or we make so many things out back there, they can't even keep track of it all. Sound hole covers for the feedback buster, all of that kind of stuff. So we're molding hundreds of products here now and assembling them and packaging. So we've reduced the amount of our dependency upon importing all the products. So we've cut back the amount of stuff we import dramatically, which is great. And we're continuing to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the strings front, I don't know what I thought, but I guess I imagined some, machine just makes the strings, but it's a pretty labor intensive product, making thicker gauge wire get down to guitar gauge, and then wrapping or coating or whatever you do next. It was wild for me to see.
Yeah, people are always surprised as to how much is involved to do it right. Right. So, like in the early part of our brand development in 1974, when we first put the D'Addario name on the strings for the first time, I try to explain to people what a hexagon core is. People don't really imagine what that looks like. So, and this was in the day of all analog photography. There wasn't a digital desktop publishing platform or any of that stuff that we do our work in now, right? And so I had a microscopic picture of a string in the hex wire, the wrapped string in the hex wire, to see how that would come out. And of course, it looked like, craters on the moon and stuff, because the wire, when you zoom in that close, it had, you see every little, fissure or whatever in the surface, and it looks like it's something bad, but it really isn't. But when you blow that up and people see it, oh, I get it now. The core has got 6 corners, and the wrap wire is going around it, and that wrap wire is softer and it's biting into those corners. But until somebody comes here and you actually show him, right, and you show him that picture, and you show them that, how you test the wire for the hexagon shape, they don't get the concept. Now that ad did a pretty good job of convincing a lot of people that was an important feature that added value to their strings, because it does make them last longer and tonally. It was a really successful ad campaign and helped launch us, at the beginning. But there's still so many people don't really understand the intricacies and of manufacturing a string, and telling those stories today in print or digitally in video or whatever. The younger folks aren't that interested. They're more interested in, I just give me the product that does the job right for me and tell me how to use it. I'm not that interested in how you're making it, right? Which is like incomprehensible to me because I'm insanely curious about how everything is made. I mean, in fact, tomorrow I'm driving all the way up to New Bedford, Massachusetts to get a tour of the Titleist ball factory with 3 of my engineers so we could see how they do their molding and how they do it so amazingly perfect every time. And the CEO there, I met through a friend, and he was generous enough to arrange for me to take a team of engineers up there to get a tour. So, I'm always insanely curious. So it's not, I don't understand why somebody who uses something wouldn't be interested in like learning a little bit about how it's made, and maybe there's something better out there that I should be trying, or maybe I didn't pick the right thing to utilize for my particular needs, my string needs or accessory needs in general, reeds or whatever, So that's something I don't quite comprehend, but that's kind of the market we deal with. So we have to find other ways of telling them about our product. But always a factory tour here makes somebody a lifelong believer in our brand, because they see that we go so far into it to do it as good as we possibly can, and it's a serious commitment at every level in the business. And that's something that culturally I'm very, very proud of my company and my team, that to stick to that culture as we've gotten bigger. Not so easy,
Yeah. And what you were saying about, today's guitar players, I think people just take it for granted because there are a lot of great guitar strings. But when you started out, it was the dark age. I mean, first off, we have to acknowledge, like, strings are in your DNA going back centuries, right? Like, you come from the longest lineage possible.
Over 300 years, which is kind of crazy, right? But yeah, you're right. It's certainly in my DNA. I started tinkering at my grandpop's shop in the basement of his home when I was 7, 8, 9 years old. I started going there. I was always interested in machines, and I was a tinkerer, and I would see my grandfather there with his fingers taped while he was feeding wire by hand. And my dad, same thing, standing there all day winding strings. And I thought, well, the string business thing is really interesting, but goddamn, if I'm going to stand there and have to put tape on my fingers and have my fingers bleed every day to make a string, it sure seems like that could be done mechanically, And I kind of had that vision as a teenager, at 13, 14 years old, when I started to get even more involved with testing strings for my dad and helping him try to develop new things. So, for me, it's always been a curious game. I'm always interested in how can I do it better and better. It could be more efficiently with less time and labor, or it could be safer, could be high quality. There's a lot of ways to be better in manufacturing.
Yeah. So just to give folks, and we cover this in the article, but your dad and grandfather, that string company was...
Darko Strings was my dad's company. Mm-hmm. So when his dad retired in 1959, he took the family business, which was C. Dario and Son, him and his dad, and he merged it with some other partners and started Darko Music Strings. And that existed from 59 to 69. And in 1969, Martin had become our largest customer. They were about 30% of his business, and they were interested in acquiring a string company. And my dad was afraid he was going to lose all that business. And he made a deal to exchange stock and actually merge with them. And my dad and my brother were partners. I wasn't. I was a young teenager at the time. So I didn't have any business interest at the moment. So they ended up getting employment contracts for 5 years. So they had to work until 1974 for Martin. And actually, they had another 5-year non-compete clause, but Martin was nice enough to, not enforce that. They didn't really feel like we were going to be successful. So they felt like, yeah, let them, they'll do their thing. They're not going to really hurt us. So, we didn't have to worry about that. Otherwise, that would have been a big bugaboo. When my dad and my brother joined us, Janet and I started the company first a year before because we didn't have any commitments for employment. And, since that time, it's grown rapidly, but it's grown at, like by everyone working together to constantly make the product better.
Yeah.
And make new products too, new things like phosphor bronze and, new innovations and strings that kind of made playing the guitar more fun and more inspiring.
Yeah. Well, and playing the guitar, we should acknowledge you were playing on a serious level. You played at the 64 World's Fair?
Yeah. Yeah, I was at the Met game last night and saw them lose 8-0, which was like literally right where the fair was in Flushing. That was, I always had tremendous fun in high school playing in my band. I learned how to run a business doing that. I didn't learn a lot in school because I was, just addicted to the guitar and playing in the band and tinkering and building things. I used to build speaker cabinets and amplifiers and things for people. And I didn't study as hard as I should have in high school. So, it kind of stifled my ability to get into a really great school. I would have probably liked to study engineering, but I didn't devote myself to it at that level as a teenager, 13 to 16, 17 years old. My dad started taking me to the NAMM show when I was 13. And that inspired me to be, very interested in the family business. And I kind of felt like that's what I was going to do. And I was pretty much committed to it,
Yeah.
So I went to school for music at Hofstra locally so I could continue to work for the company at the same time while I was in college. And I got a great education there and learned a lot. But I have to say, I learned more about business running my band in high school, learning to ask for, to sign a contract, when somebody stiff shit and doesn't show up. We had all kinds of learning lessons running a band. And, I learned how to, always plan for contingencies. You got spare fuses, you got this, you got that, you got your extra cables, everything you need to make sure that if something goes wrong, you could cover it, right? And that's what you have to do in business. And running the band was like a big learning experience for me. We were serious about it. So we practiced 5 days a week after school every day. That was what we did. So we knew our songs really, really tightly. And we used to get a lot of gigs. And back then they actually paid you to play. You didn't have to put a cup out. You didn't have to put a cup out. We never put a tip jar out at a gig. Nobody even thought of having to do that because you were getting paid.
Yeah. Well, also you were getting paid, but this was also probably a corrupt part of the corrupt era of the music industry too, where a booker might, have nefarious things going on in the background or not pay you, and you had to be on the ball.
Yeah. Yeah. But in high school, you play high school. Back then, we used to have high school dances, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, student council. And we have fraternity parties and sorority parties and bar mitzvahs and sweet 16s. And, we even played a few weddings as a second band because the bride wanted to have rock and roll at the wedding instead of just, standards. And we made good money at it, like we would play Bishop Malloy High School in Queens, and which was like, there would be 1,000 kids there in the gym. They used to pay us $500 to play. Back then, $500 is a lot of money, and one year, it was probably the year we played at the World's Fair, 65, I think we played the second year. It was open 2 years. And we had practiced and we learned so many songs, and 2 or 3 weeks before school would start, all the kids were coming back from camp or wherever they were for the summer. And they were all wanted to see each other, but there was no formal thing to do, right? School wasn't open. So there was nothing going on that was organized. And, we came up with the idea of throwing our own dance. So we rented a VFW hall in Limerick for $50. We printed some flyers. We stapled them to every telephone pole in 4 or 5 towns where we played frequently. And we said $1 to get in, and we 6 o'clock, and we get over there at 5 like it's a regular gig, and there's a line 3 blocks around the corner because everybody wanted to get together. We filled the need that was there without even realizing we were doing it, right? And the fire marshals came and stopped us for letting more people in. We took home $497. We're sitting on my bed at 2 a.m. counting out the singles. But I had to call every uncle and relative to come and be bouncers at every door because we didn't prepare for anything. We're 16-year-old kids, right? And but it was quite a learning experience. You felt, when you have those successes, you say, I could do anything. I could do more. I could do more of that. Because it gave me kind of that attitude of confidence in business later on. It built my confidence that crazy ideas could work, and you should give them a try.
Yeah. Speaking of crazy ideas, in addition to this long family lineage of, in the string industry, seeing your folks do it, Mario Maccaferri, a legend. Everybody knows him for the Django Reinhardt Selmer style guitar. You got to know him, and you got to know him at his most entrepreneurial side. I'd love to hear, what influence he had on you and how that came to be.
There you go.
You've pulled out a Maestro uke for those who can't see.
So this is actually the Islander uke.
Yes.
Because this is how he introduced it. This is the 1949 model that Arthur Godfrey played on his TV show. And then after that show, the phone rang off the wall at his company, and he renamed this the TV Pal. And this was my dad's biggest break in the string business, because all we had to do was buy 4 monofilament nylon strings from DuPont, dye them to the colors he wanted for this method book that Mario wrote, and knot each one so they wouldn't pull through the bridge. So we weren't allowed to watch TV without knotting strings from Mario, the whole family, uncles, aunts, cousins, and I had 54 cousins. And everybody worked for my dad on piecework at night, knotting strings for Mario. And he made, we don't know for sure how many, but a minimum of 7 million, maybe 9 million of these ukuleles were made from 1949 to like early 60s, when I think he sold all the molds to the Mattel toy company at that time, and they kind of screwed it all up. But anyway, Mario was one of the most incredibly creative minds I've ever run across, and I've had the good fortune of meeting quite a few. But Mario was like a second dad to me. I know that his son Marco was involved in his business for a while, and he just couldn't work with his son. He was one of those guys that it had to be his way or no way. But I was more of a maverick, so I would talk back to him and challenge him, and I think he liked that, actually. He respected it, right, in a way that he couldn't get that relationship with his son. So he used to help me with machine design, for instance. When we were building out this company, we first, in like 75, 76 was when I started to develop the chops for designing and building machines, first by modifying machines we already bought, and then later by actually saying, okay, I could build this thing myself. I didn't really need to buy it. And he would get involved whenever I had a problem. He loved when I had a problem, if I needed him, right? If I called him and say, hey, Mario, I'm stuck on this, he would jump in his Cadillac and drive down, have lunch with me, and spend the afternoon or the morning, brainstorming and trying to help me with whatever it was I was working on. And then he would call me the next day and ask me if I tried to say, Mario, I got to design the parts. I got to make the parts. I mean, I don't work all night long. I actually go home and sleep. So, he was a very impatient guy like I am. He wanted to see stuff get done right away. But that guy, the things he accomplished in his life are just, I could talk about him for days. I mean, he was a concertizing classic guitarist, second to Segovia in Europe. He was a luthier and made violins, guitars. I mean, he was really the first to make a production cutaway guitar with the Selmer Maccaferri guitar that Django Reinhardt played. And when he ran the Selmer guitar shop in Paris, just before World War II started. He made about 2,000 of those guitars, and he just did one thing after the other. So when he split up with Selmer and he had a dispute with them, he saw they were making reeds on the floor below where he was making the guitars, and he saw the machinery and he envisioned a better way of making a reed, and he built a reed cutting machine with a wheel with diamond cutters on it, which is what we do today with our Rico and D'Addario woodwinds brands, and so does Van Doren in France. But back before that, people were just using tool steel, and this cane's a tough material to cut, and you'd have to resharpen your blades every 1,000 or 2,000 reeds, which was quite costly. And with diamonds, the way he developed it, the thing lasts for years and years. And he started a company making reeds. In fact, he made the original Rico reeds for Rico, the company that we ended up buying in 2004. And he was doing great, but then Hitler occupied France, and he was in France, and he shipped all of the machines to London to his brother, who then shipped them to America. And he was going to try to get to America, but he kind of waited too long. And there was the last voyage of the Ile-de-France from Paris to New York. He was trying to get on there, and he dressed up in a tuxedo, hired a limousine. He didn't have a ticket, took his guitar and a suitcase, and he drove to the front of the line. The line's, blocks long. People try to get on his boat, and he talks his way onto the ship, telling him that he was hired to play. He's a musician, and he's one of the performers, and he conned his way onto the ship got on the boat. But that's the story of Mario, his entire life. I mean, he never took no for an answer. And so he gets here in America, and he starts the French American Reed Company and made Maccaferri reeds. And he was doing really well, and had big endorsements like, Glenn Miller and so on. And the cane came from the south of France, and then there were all kinds of embargoes put in place, and Hitler wouldn't sell the cane to America once we declared war on them. And he had all of these contracts for making reeds for the army bands, and he goes down to Washington, D.C. He read an article about injection molding. He doesn't know anything about it. He just read one article. Goes down to Washington, D.C. and tells them, I can make a reed from plastic. I need $150,000 for the machinery. And they give him a grant. And sure enough, he made a playable plastic reed in like months. It was called My Miracle. And it played okay, not a great sounding reed, but it's very similar to the Leger reed that's molded out of polypropylene today. It's just that they've done a better job of making the reed sound and play good. And but that was done in like 1940 something, right? When you think about how long ago that was. But that was the thinking he had. And then, he's got this reed. He's got this molding machinery where he can make enough reeds for the year in about a week or two. So now he's thinking, what else can I do with this thing? And there was a huge shortage of wood because all the wood was going to the war effort. And the housewives couldn't get clothespins to dry their laundry, and there were no clothes dryers yet. The clothes dryer hadn't yet been invented. So he starts molding multicolored plastic clothespins, and he made hundreds of millions of those things. And, so he was just one of these resourceful guys that would figure out stuff. And he had over 100 patents in his name. He reinvented the way, extrusion screws for injection molding machines were designed and heated. And, the guy was just, his mind never stopped. So he was a tremendous inspiration for me. He's a tremendous inspiration for John Monteleone, too, by the way. They got to be very friendly. John, of course, much later in his life than me. I used to go to Mario's factory with my dad when I was 7, 8, 9 years old to deliver strings on a Saturday morning. And, it's what got me interested in engineering and manufacturing. I'd see all of these guys at drafting tables, and then Mario would take me outside and show me how they were making the mold, and then how the mold went in the machine, and how they were making these. He was making that Maccaferri guitar with metal frets and injection molding the plastic over it. You don't know how hard that is to do, even today with digital equipment to do the mold making. But he did it perfectly in 1956, 57. Guy just it was endless the amount of things he invented. Great. Just a great story. I mean, and then later on when we started to really grow this business and we were doing the classic guitar concert series in Manhattan, he was really an avid classic guitar fan. And I used to take him and Maria to every single concert. I would pick them up and Rye Beach. They were in Rye, New York. And so it was kind of on the way. And I would pick them up. We'd have dinner and they'd go to the concerts with us. And he was like a little brat. One week, he thought the concert was Thursday, but it was really the following week. So he's all dressed up in his 3-piece suit and he's pacing back and forth, waiting for me to come to pick him up. And we never show up, but he wouldn't call me because he was too proud. And he figured I just forgot about him, right? So all he did was curse me out for about a day or two. And then, of course, on Tuesday, the following week, I said, hey, Mario, don't forget, we got the concert Thursday night. Oh, yeah, okay, I'll be ready. Like he made like nothing happened. Then we get in the car and Marie says, well, you should have heard him talking about you last week. But that's the kind of relationship we had, He was unbelievable. Funny guy.
Yeah. And he found your dad because he needed strings.
He needed strings. He called a distributor or two in Manhattan that obviously didn't have bulk ukulele strings, but they said, well, there's this Italian guy in Astoria that's making strings and, he probably can make them for you. And my dad went up there, and it was the year I was born, 1949 was the year I was born, is when he met Mario. And he went up there, and Mario gives him this like $20,000 order, which back then was like, getting a $1 million order today. And he's driving home and everything. He kept pulling off to the side of the road to look at the order to make sure he wasn't hallucinating. Because he had such a demand for these things immediately because of Arthur Godfrey playing it on TV. And it just showed you the power that television had. Even in that very early days when only like 5% of the households could afford a TV, it still had tremendous power. And then, of course, by 1960, when Kennedy and Nixon had the first debate, we really saw how the TV was going to affect politics, right? But Mario, I mean, he rode that wave of that television publicity so well, and my dad benefited from it.
It's also fascinating to me that we're talking about the 50s and 60s and Mario Maccaferri injection molding plastic, and here we are in 2024. You're 50 years into the D'Addario thing. You're going to the Titleist factory to see how they do Pro V1s. Like nothing has stopped. It's still going on.
I know. And God bless my wife. She's not here today, but if she was, she would be like, when are you going to stop? When does it stop? When does the drive stop? I've been fortunate enough to find a lovely partner and have a really great relationship with a woman who was good friends with my wife actually as well. And, she's the same. You just got to cut 20% of it down because you can't do as much as you did before. But the thing for me is, I'm trying to stay out of the nitty gritty details of the business and to focus on the fun stuff. Mm-hmm. I get sucked into some of that nitty gritty things only because I'm a pretty good problem solver. And when they're stuck on something, I feel compelled or, needed at the moment and help them a little bit. But I'm getting better and better at it. And, this next year is going to be a great transition year for me because I'm going to really focus on the new stuff and the innovation and not worry about whether or not we're, maximizing some little detail of the business that somebody else can maximize for me.
I can't wait to see what you come up with. I mean, the nodding machine for sure, but who knows what else?
Who knows, right?
Yeah. I mean, where are we at with specifically guitar strings? I feel like they are so good now and it, guitars, there's millions of them. We can't reinvent that. We need strings for those existing guitars and that pickup system. looking in your crystal ball, thinking about all the top secret stuff that you probably weren't even able to share with me, is it all going to be little iterative improvements, or are there some big changes in the guitar string market in the next 10 or 15 years?
Yeah, it's a tough question to answer. I would say that it's a combination of both for sure. As you know, we put a lot of our resources to develop the excess film coated string. And it wasn't our own invention because, Gore Elixir kind of broke the ice with that product, and they had a patent that expired in 2017. And we were able to develop what we think is a slightly, is an improved process, but it's similar to theirs, and it uses an ePTFE film, which unfortunately is when that polymer is made at the company who polymerizes the film. There is these forever chemicals, the PFAS and PFOS that you hear about in the news, and it being a big issue now, and regulations being put in place to cut back unnecessary products that make that byproduct, that bad, industrial waste or whatever it is. Now, fortunately, the film we're using, nothing in our factory is unsafe, and the strings are not unsafe. However, during the process of making it, they've had to make lots of changes to make the film safer. But it's still going to be, there'll be regulations out there that probably make it impossible for D'Addario and Gore to continue to sell a string that utilizes a film made in that way. So a big project for us is looking at alternatives and looking at even better alternatives than that material, so that right now we can't make a classical coated string, because to cure that film on the string, we have to use an oven and temperatures that melt the core, because the core is either nylon or Zyx or another material. Some have higher melting points, but it doesn't survive the process. So we need a lower melting temperature of film. And so there's a whole lot of things involved. It's a big research project, and it's probably going to take 2 years. We just had an hour and a half update meeting. We have one every week on it. Lots of research being done. But that's like kind of a main improvement I see, is that the coated string part of our business is growing like big time double digits. And people are realizing that it makes sense to spend $17.99 on a set of phosphor bronze acoustic strings that last you 5 times or 7 times longer than buying 7 sets of EJ16s for $7 or whatever. It's actually cheaper, and you don't waste all your time changing that many sets of strings. So in the end, that could result in our overall volume of strings required to produce might be less, but revenue wise will probably be the same or better, because the product costs more. But it's adding value for the customer. It's solving a problem. It's making him not waste his time changing strings unnecessarily, right? So those are the kind of projects that we got to focus on, is how do we add more value for the customer? And we really feel like the coated string thing is something that we've got a lot of work to do on, to continue to improve the products. And some of it will be incremental, and some of it will be is groundbreaking, if stuff that we're going to come up with. We've got some things that we're really excited about, that we're seeing some materials that we never dreamed of were available, so that's fun and it's good. And then of course on the other side, there's a lot of niche stuff that you could work on to do better, to offer all of the oddball solutions that real musicians are looking for, that might not really be giant revenue generators. The extended range guitars, electric and even classical, and acoustic. That's a big thing. And making really great low bass strings that match in tone and transition perfectly. We've got some work to do there to get it perfect. So, but that's like incremental stuff. It's not going to make a lot of revenue for the company, but we want to maintain the position of people looking at us as the string experts. And in order to be the string experts, we need to solve those special problems for musicians in like extended range strings.
Circling back to the PFAS coated string dilemma, one of the things that struck me during our long interview was just all along the 50-year journey, you have made these decisions, some of which were rather expensive, to do solar panels, to do all of these things that ended up benefiting not only the environment, but eventually your bottom line. But those were not in vogue back then. I mean, maybe solar was, I don't know, but
Yeah, not really. It wasn't that effective back then, but it's more effective now.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, you've had a unique commitment. I mean, making strings, it's like metal and like a lot of machinery, but you've had this commitment to the environment all along that I just found really intriguing.
Yeah. I mean, the development of the environmental packaging that eliminated all those individual envelopes was really a big thing. I mean, we've saved billions of envelopes since 1991 when we began introducing that packaging. And that was a fun project for me because I knew it was win-win that, we could lower the cost of a set of packaging a set of strings by eliminating 75% of the packaging material. But at the same time, we're going to help the planet and saving all these trees and paper that was getting wasted. So those kind of projects I love. And, I'm working with a ghostwriter to finish this book I'm working on. And, we've kind of changed the theme of the book to be more to show how many of my decisions were really made instinctively from my gut. And then we would do the due diligence like a regular business company would, like a proper businessman. After we've done exploration on the feasibility of the product, I find it very difficult to take an MBA approach where you say, "Oh, I'm going to go into this business and I'm going to go into injection molding and I'm going to create, my own vertically integrated department to make peg winders and pro winders and reed cases and those kind of things that we make here." I know instinctively and intuitively that if I do it right, it's got to be profitable because I'm buying it from somebody who's making a profit, right? But at the same time, somebody has to do the due diligence to do the return on investment calculations to make sure that there's enough critical mass in the amount you're going to make and that you're going to be able to make a profit like a regular vendor does, not always the case. So, the theme is that there's a combination here that works. You use your instincts and then you check your instincts with your brain and your business intelligence. And that makes for a very successful solution, producing process.
Making a profit in the gear space in general, like hats off to you. That is no small feat.
Yeah. Fortunately, the accessory business is a part of the music business and any business almost. Accessorizing is always a little bit more profitable than selling the big ticket item because, sometimes, the guitar business, for instance, it's a red ocean, right? How many guitar makers are there? Now the quality's so good, like everywhere, right? I mean, people know how to make guitars. We've spread the knowledge base incredibly, right? But not a lot of people know how to make high carbon steel wire for guitar strings and music strings. And in fact, most of my competitors are buying our wire now because it's so good. Our sales to competitors are up 58% this year because we've increased our production. And the reason we sell this superior material to our competitors is we couldn't afford to build the kind of wire plant that I built without having additional volume to cover the overheads. So much in the same way that 30% of the strings we wind go on original equipment guitars, for original equipment, 30% of that volume sold at a lower price and a lower gross margin. But it's critical mass that covers the overhead here that lets us buy better, lets us invest in the machinery and the things we need to do to make the regular part of our business more profitable. So when we look at projects like that, we have to look at the whole landscape of it. And a lot of it has to do with wanting to make the very best material, whether it's the wire or our printing or whatever of packaging, but it requires a big investment in equipment and stuff. So sometimes you have to actually look for some additional outside business to cover that overhead.
Yeah. Well, let me just say, I can't wait to read your book because your business acumen is like the best I've heard, and I love talking to you.
Well, thank you. I like talking to you too.
The story is in the 55th issue of the Fretboard Journal, and I can't thank you enough just for all your time and giving me that factory tour. And it's just been a blast getting to see the inner workings of how strings get made.
Oh, my pleasure, really. I mean, I love the magazine. I mean, you really did a great job on that. I think it's really a great effort. It's an honor to be, interviewed and be featured.
Thank you so much, and have a lot of fun at that Titleist factory. I'm sure you'll be taking notes.
Yeah, they won't let me take any pictures, though, unfortunately.
All right, that was my conversation with Jim D'Addario. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope everyone out there is doing well. If you like this episode or any of the episodes, please leave us a review over on Apple Podcasts. And thanks as always for tuning in.